I'm Jeannie Reed. I'm the marketing manager here at the Gluten Intolerance Group, and it's so nice that you could be with us tonight. For those of you who are not aware of the Gluten Intolerance Group, we are a nonprofit organization, been around since 1974, and empowering the gluten-free community is the focus of what we do every day. And in addition to being a support organization, we also have our food safety division, where our GFCO and our GFFS program work to keep your gluten-free food safe, whether it's in a package with a certified gluten-free logo or at a restaurant through our food safety program. So tonight, so excited, we're talking with two of the all-stars on our team here at the Gluten Intolerance Group. We have Laura Allred, who is our PhD science guru, regulatory manager for the GFCO. And we have Lola O'Rourke, our education supervisor, a registered dietitian nutritionist, and expert on our team. Going to ask them to take a second to introduce themselves before we get started. And I'm not sure if I can, it might be easier if we turn cameras off, but we can feel free to leave them on if you prefer. And I will let the speakers go. So Laura, I'll introduce you first.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Yeah, I'm Laura Allred. I'm the regulatory manager, like she said, for GFCO. So I'm in charge of our standards for gluten-free certification. And I will let Lola, I won't jump into the topic. I'll let Lola introduce herself a little bit.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lola O'Rourke, education coordinator. I'm a dietitian. I'm gluten-free myself. I've been gluten-free for about 20 years. And what I do for GIG primarily is try to get good educational information out there via our website, via our magazine, via events like this, information that will help everyone stay safe. So let's just jump into the topic. What we wanted to talk about was the temporary FDA guidance that came out almost 2 weeks ago now. I think it's 2 weeks ago Friday. Some of you may be familiar with it, may have read it, others of you may not have. Basically, this is guidance that came out in response to the pandemic, stating that food manufacturers can make small modifications in ingredients in products without changing labeling accordingly. So that should raise some big red flags for all of us. They do go on to say that that should not be done in the case of allergens, in the case of gluten, and some other things. However, there's definitely room for error there. So we think this is something that those of us who are gluten-free really need to be aware of.
Yeah, Lola, I mean, as you know, labeling's sort of the biggest cause of gluten and allergen recalls. So there's already some difficulty in the industry with getting labels right. And now to move to saying, well, you can change things, but you don't have to change your label, that does bring up another level of concern for us. Another part that's of concern is that they say you should take into account, concerns about gluten and allergens. And, when you're writing a regulation, you got to be careful about your wording. And, I just had a conversation with a client today where they had a positive gluten result in a product, and we were talking about how they can't release that product with the GFCO logo. And so at some point during the conversation, I said, yeah, you shouldn't release that product with the logo. And they came back and went, shouldn't or can't? No, you can't. You cannot release that with the logo. So wording in these regulations is really important. And the FDA knows that. I mean, these are people who write regulations on a regular basis. So it's a little concerning that they put that you should consider it, not that you must or have to consider gluten and allergen when you make these formulation changes.
Yeah, and the Gluten Intolerance Group, along with numerous other organizations and associations who serve the gluten-free community, sent in a letter to the FDA I believe it just went in today or yesterday, indicating to them what our concerns are about this. And this is, you can get more information about this and the details of the regulation. I think we're going to include a link at least to the regulation. Is that right, Jeannie? But in this letter, we're basically indicating that, you know, this really is a concern for those of us who need to be gluten-free, because a manufacturer may, for instance, choose to substitute in malt syrup for corn syrup. And you would not know that this was the case by simply reading the ingredient labeling. Another issue is products that are labeled gluten-free. Manufacturers, you know, they're probably not going to be intentionally substituting gluten-containing ingredients, but, you know, it can happen. It seems certainly possible that inadvertent mistakes could happen. So, you know, we are a little bit concerned about this. Many companies are saying that they will be putting these changes up on their websites, for instance. And just backing up a little bit, I think part of the reason this is happening is, you know, because of supply chain issues, et cetera, and because changing labeling really can take a very long time, I think up to a year or two. So, I mean, you know, there's good reason behind why the FDA is doing this, but we really feel it needs to be modified a bit.
Yeah, definitely the idea behind it is understandable, but the wording of it maybe needs a little work, and the enforcement of it needs a little work. You know, it's part of the reason GFCO exists is the fact that manufacturers need help in figuring out how to make gluten-free products. And a big part of what we do in our certification is review their products and the ingredients they use in those products. And, you know, to this day, we catch submissions where we say you can't use that ingredient in a product, or just because something tests negative, you know, something like a hydrolyzed wheat protein, you'll get a negative test on that, but you can't use that in a gluten-free product. So manufacturers do need help with this, and I fear that this kind of a regulation leaves them out there really with not a lot of guidance in terms of, you know, what substitutions they can make safely.
Yeah, and just, you know, sort of generally, in terms of label reading, what we kind of recommend is a sort of a three-step approach to choosing safe gluten-free products. And, you know, the first is to look for products that are certified gluten-free, just because that means the work has been done for you, basically, and you know those are gluten-free. Secondly, products that are labeled gluten-free, which, thanks to the FDA regulation, generally meant that products were safe. And then third, if neither of those is the case, to always read ingredient labels. Well, now, considering this new temporary guidance, you know, it really throws sort of the second and third approaches to choosing products into question, because you just can't rely 100% at this point on ingredient lists. So it's concerning.
Yeah, and it's fortunate that part of our program has always been review of ingredient updates, and our clients are sending in ingredient updates like crazy. As I mentioned to you earlier, Lola, I mean, we review hundreds of product ingredient updates every day because clients do swap ingredients. They swap suppliers, even, you know, without a pandemic. And it's really important that we look at that and catch any issues. So that is one of the things that makes us concerned about this as well, is there isn't that check system. At least if it's on the ingredient label, there's a way to check, but when things don't have to be listed, it does make it difficult.
Yeah, one of the ingredients that we were talking about earlier that is probably a particular concern is oats on products that are labeled gluten-free, not certified, but labeled gluten-free, that, you know, in the past contained certified gluten-free oats. Maybe those certified gluten-free oats are no longer available, and so other oats could be substituted without any indication on the package about that substitution, and therefore that would make that product unsafe.
Yeah, and I had mentioned to you, Lola, too, that a lot of our certified oat suppliers, a lot of the purity protocol oat suppliers are in Canada. We do have them in the US, but a lot of them are in Canada. And so there's definitely a chance that this pandemic has disrupted that supply chain. I mean, I know we've had clients who, they haven't been able to travel back and forth from the US to Canada because of coronavirus. The mail, even just the mail going into Canada, has been delayed. So there's definitely a chance that it's going to be difficult to get those certified gluten-free oats from those suppliers in Canada. And again, if you're one of our companies and you submit an update that you're now switching suppliers, we're going to tell you whether that's an appropriate supplier to go to or not. But without that guidance, you may just be getting commodity oats in a product that's labeled gluten-free.
Laura and Lola, there's a question. It says, do you know what ingredients or sources are in question that may have made them relax this rule?
I don't think it was in reaction to any specific ingredient. I think it's just general supply chain disruption because, in a lot of cases, shipping has been stopped, flights have been stopped, employees aren't working, people aren't working in the processing plants, so there just isn't as much availability of all kinds of things, of raw commodity materials, of packaged goods. Just in the whole supply chain has sort of been disrupted.
I mean, I think, one thing that it would be wise to keep in mind is that, it would be a good idea to contact companies if it's a product that, previously was gluten-free and you have reason to believe there might be a change. Of course, we may not know that. We can certainly try contacting companies, look on their websites. I believe that, there's even an indication, it's recommended that companies have updated information online. So it may not always be there, but at least it's something that might be there. We can certainly always try to contact companies to get information.
Yeah, and hopefully they'll be good about supplying that. I mean, our concern is, like I mentioned at the beginning, there's already so much worry about labeling, and there's already so many odd things about labeling. We've done webinars on may contain and shared equipment statements that are already really confusing for people. And now you throw in this extra uncertainty of not being able to trust the ingredient list. It's why we're really concerned. And I'd like to sort of thank Tricia Thompson, Gluten-Free Watchdog, for getting this process started to get this letter sent out and bringing together all the celiac and gluten-free organizations to send this message to the FDA.
So another question that is there is there any proposed end date to this change?
They have not posted an end date.
Yeah, not at this time. And that's, again, that's one of the concerning factors.
Yes, their definition of the end is upon termination of the public health emergency. And I don't know if there is a definition of that. I don't know. I mean, I assume a public health emergency has been declared, but I've never heard of one being terminated. So I don't know what the expiration date is on a public health emergency.
Okay, and then somebody's wanting to know, so with all of these changes, how can we make sure that we're safe in choosing products?
Well, I'm going to say, certainly choosing certified products is more important now than ever, because as Laura was saying, a GFCO company can never make a change in ingredients without running that through our program. And that's always been the case, and that continues to be the case. So you can still really rely on the GFCO certified products.
So now that you're talking about the certified products, Lydia had a question. It says, why are there products that say gluten-free on them, but they have no certification symbol? What does this mean exactly? How safe are these products that say that they're processed in a place with wheat, like almonds or other nuts?
So The FDA, who regulates all the food labeling, allows any product to be labeled gluten-free if it contains less than 20 parts per million of gluten, and also has no intentionally added gluten sources. So that's a general national guideline. Any product is free to be labeled gluten-free, doesn't require going to a certifier. Certification is an extra step that companies take when, in some cases, they want the guidance of a certifier like GFCO, but they also want to increase consumer confidence by saying, look, we're claiming this product's gluten-free, and we have an independent third party coming in, auditing our plants, reviewing our products and ingredients, reviewing our testing data to ensure that that product really is gluten-free. Now, the FDA does do oversight of their 20 ppm threshold. They do oversight of gluten-free claims, but nowhere, I mean, we do it for every product, and they do it, spot checking. They just don't have, the kind of staff. So are they less safe than a certified product? You would hope not. I mean, if they're labeled gluten-free, they should have less than 20 parts per million of gluten. If that's a safe level for you, then those products would be safe. Certification just adds that extra assurance. The companies are, using best practices. In our case for GFCO, our threshold is 10 ppm. So there's a little extra, stringency there.
So another question came in is, now that we're talking about certification, is how often do you audit the companies that use your logo? And then how can somebody report a product if it's a violation?
So we audit every plant every year, and they have to submit their testing data into us quarterly. We have other contacts with them throughout the year. They do, proficiency testing program with us to make sure they're doing their testing correctly. But those are kind of the main contacts we have with the plants. If you want to send a concern about a product, that would go to, I never email myself, so let me see here what the alert email is.
Website.
GFCO alerts, isn't it? Oh, you can go to the contact us on the gfco.org site too. That'll get to us. But there is a direct email. I think it's GFCO alerts, gfco.alerts@gluten.org.
Or on our gluten.org website or a gfco.org website.
There's a contact us, yeah. Yeah, and there's a specific drop down to say, I have a question or complaint about a certified product, and that'll get to us.
We were going to also let people know that they can provide input directly to the FDA too, right? We didn't mention that yet, did we? We were going to include that link.
I did include the link. I'll include it just in case. There's a lot of
guidance.
It's a moving chat, so I will add that link all the time. It's also on our website under a listing under news that lists the kind of the details about this. There's a here button that links directly to this as well.
Perfect. Laura, I think this is a question for you. There's a couple of them where, when they're talking about changing labels, it does take a process where a company has to have that label changed. Mm-hmm. In addition to that, when it says, how safe are products that say they've been processed in a place that processes wheat?
So, yeah, I think that was part of another question you asked earlier about may contain and shared equipment statements. So if it is a certified product, and it has a statement like processed in a facility that processes wheat, or it has, shared equipment with something like wheat. If that is a certified product, it contains less than 10 parts per million of gluten. The reason they put statements like that, shared equipment, may contain, is because wheat is also an allergen. And the parts of wheat that people are allergic to aren't necessarily gluten. There's other proteins in wheat that people have allergies to. And there aren't test kits for those, and there aren't governmental thresholds for those. So the companies are afraid that, well, I know there's less than 10 ppm gluten, but I have no idea how much there is of these other proteins. So I better warn people with wheat allergies that it's possible some, minute fraction of wheat is in this product. So yeah, when it comes to wheat, the may contain and the shared equipment are really about wheat as an allergen and not about gluten.
Yeah, I think those statements are so confusing. I mean, understandably so, on products, for instance, that aren't certified or aren't even labeled gluten-free, but yet, according to the ingredient list, appear to be gluten-free. Then a consumer sees that kind of a statement and just reasonably becomes alarmed.
Yeah, and I actually would pay attention to those. If you're buying a product and there isn't a gluten source in the ingredient list, but it's not labeled gluten-free, there may be a reason for that. And if they're putting a statement on their, shared facility, may contain, I'd probably put more weight on that if they're not making a gluten-free claim. For us, we do certify companies that use shared equipment. So they'll, process a gluten-containing product and then a gluten-free product. But we require an intense amount of cleaning and testing in between those two steps. Whereas in the instance you're talking about, if it's just a product doesn't inherently contain a gluten source, but isn't labeled gluten-free, and it's processed on shared equipment or in the same facility, I'd worry that they're not taking those extra steps at that changeover to the gluten-free product because they probably don't feel they need to. They're not making a gluten-free claim, so they're not as worried about it.
Somebody has a question just as the general, as a celiac, and not having, that you cannot have gluten. Can you just explain that briefly to somebody, what it is that they cannot have?
So with celiac disease, you need to avoid anything that contains proteins from wheat, rye, barley, or their related grains. So there's triticale, that's a wheat-rye hybrid. There's different forms of wheat, spelt, things like that. So anything in that family, the wheat, rye, barley family, needs to be avoided because that's what triggers the immune response that does all the intestinal damage that you get in celiac disease.
Thanks. A question came in regarding certification, as far as, does it cost the vendors money for certification?
Yes. The manufacturers, the product manufacturers do pay for their certification, for the audit and the travel that we do and the product and ingredient reviews that we do. Yeah, they do. They pay for certification.
Perfect. And then do we have, or can we put up, somebody's asking what the certified symbols look like and, to look out for.
Jeannie can talk to us about the new symbol.
Absolutely. Let me see if I can open that up for us real quick. We are so excited because this year we are launching a new certification symbol, and I really am excited to show that to you. The certification logo that many of you know, and we've had for the past 10 years, is getting a bit of a makeover.
15 years, Jeannie.
Oh my goodness, I spoke to.
Doing this since 2005.
Jeannie, while you're looking for that, can somebody's asking, why is the symbol changing?
Sure. A big reason is that the GF symbol that we've been using, it has not been trademarked internationally, and people have begun to use the letters GF to mean a lot of things that that aren't what we mean. So we'll see it on things that are grain-free, gluten-friendly, a lot of things that aren't going to help if you're looking for a certified product. So It's really a matter of us being able to protect our logo and make sure that anything carrying our logo truly is certified. We spend a lot of time and effort monitoring our logo use. We spend a lot of time looking at websites, making sure people aren't using the logo when they shouldn't be. Even then, though, we can't catch every case. So please, again, use that contact us form if you see a product out there that you think may not be certified. But with our new logo, it'll be trademarked internationally, and we'll be able to defend it in every country.
I'm just going to share my screen here.
And there's a 2-year time period, is that right, for the transition for companies to make to the new logo?
Yeah, you're going to see both logos out there until March of 2022. By March of 2022, everybody should have changed over to our new logo. The only exception might be on bilingual logos. Those may take a little longer for people to adopt. In Canada, we're going to have a French English, and for Spanish speaking countries, we'll have a Spanish speaking or Spanish English version.
Can everyone see my screen here? I apologize if it looks a little pixelated as I try to blow it up for you here, but the certification mark that is on most products, there are 60,000 products that we certify. And most of them at this point in time have the certification mark here on the left with the circle and the GF. A lot of things have circles with GFs and other similar looks and feels, which is, sometimes causes confusion. The new certification mark that is going to start appearing on products, I think we have about 10% of the companies have already started printing with the new mark, will most likely look like this unless the package is small, and then it will look like this. What you can see at the bottom, and it's a little bit grainy, but GFCO.org is on these marks so that whenever you see this new mark, you will know that it is certified by GFCO, and there will be no question as to whether or not this is a GFCO certified product or something that looks like.
Jeannie froze up on us. So yeah, and the mark won't always appear in that color scheme. People can do any 2 colors of their choice. If they go, this is technically a 3-color with the blue, the green, and the white fill.
In any country across.
Hey, she's back. We lost you for a second, Jeannie.
Oh my goodness.
So another question came in. Let me see if I can, sorry, I lost it for a second. As a proctor of myself, as well as my clients who are celiac, I'm a personal chef. Is there one thing that I could look for that would give me assurance that something is gluten-free?
So in terms of choosing ingredients for cooking as a personal chef?
But Dom, do you want to clarify that a little bit more?
Well, it's a product, or just, is there something that I need to look for regarding a label that I need to be, just have some sort of a surety that I am doing the best that I could do for my clients in regards to everything that is occurring?
Well, I would say that choosing certified products is going to give you the most reliability that the ingredients are actually gluten-free.
And as a chef, you probably are buying a lot of, fruits and vegetables, things that are naturally gluten-free. You don't necessarily need to look for certified versions of those, but certainly anything packaged buying.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. But when it comes to just anything in the middle of the grocery store, would there be a symbol or something that I would know?
Yeah.
At least a little assurity.
Yeah. All right, Jeannie, pop those logos
Yep.
back.
I'm gonna pop these logos into the chat.
And I'm going to take a picture of them so I have them. Thank
Well,
you.
and another thing you can do is when you're in the store, look at our product finder. And Jeannie, I don't know if you're able to give people a link to that. We have on the GFCO.org site a product finder for certified products. It's updated daily, so it'll always be really recent information. So if you have a product, you can, look up the name, look up the brand name, and see if it's something that's certified. Now, it needs to carry one of those logos in order to be certified. But if you're looking and you're like, I'm not sure if this is really certified, you can also check our online product finder.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, I would say one other thing that may apply to you being a personal chef, but to others as well, is choosing naturally gluten-free products like lentils or quinoa or amaranth, gluten-free grains, because there is a risk of cross-contact with gluten-containing grains for some of those products. It really is recommended to choose either labeled or certified versions of those products.
Okay. That definitely does help. I appreciate it tremendously.
I put the link to the GFCO product finder in the chat, as well as the picture of the 3 logos for you to keep an eye on. Just note, I believe, do we have 100? We don't have 100% participation in that product finder. There may still be some products out there that are not specifically in that product finder, but most are. Do you know the number, Laura? Is it about 80% of our products are in that product finder now?
I would think, yeah, it's pretty close to that. Most people have really adopted getting on. We get people who are, how quickly can I get on the online product finder?
It is a new list. This list has come out just recently in the past few months, and all data was verified before putting it up there. So that's why there may be a few straggling brands as we just make sure we have a complete.
What I think could be useful to for people to hear, Laura, is a little bit about what differentiates GFCO certification from some other certifications, because there seem to be a lot of questions about, looking for certified products, because there are other certifications out there.
There are, yes. We don't like to speak of them, but there are. Well, GFCO was the first gluten-free certification, and to me, the most important thing to know about the GFCO certification is it was born from the gluten intolerance group. It came from a consumer support organization, and that continues to be the goal. I mean, yes, we work with manufacturers every day, we audit their plants, but at the end of the day, we're getting them to make safe products for the gluten-free consumer. It's not a business for us. We're a nonprofit. I know someone asked, do people pay for it? They do, just because we have to have human beings in buildings or at this point in their homes, processing an awful lot of data and going out and doing audits. And so we need to be able to support the function. But it's really just part of GIG's mission to get out there and make sure there are safe gluten-free products for people. On a functional level of the certification itself, we have a stricter standard, a stricter threshold than most other certifications at 10 ppm. We're not following the FDA 20 ppm guideline or the Codex 20 ppm guideline. We require testing and monitor that testing. We need to see their testing submissions every quarter. They're monitored when we do our audits. And relevant to this conversation are those product and ingredient reviews. I mean, we look at the ingredients for every single product that carries our logo. And we, coming from the background we have and the 40 plus years of the gluten intolerance group, we have enough experience to actually be able to do those reviews and say, yeah, that ingredient is safe, and no, that one's not. And that's just not something you can get in other certifiers who are doing it as a side certification for the 50 other certifications that they do. This is our sole focus. And again, it's always done with the consumer in mind.
Lola, this is a question for you. There's 2 parts to this. Is, any thoughts regarding the possible drug that people can take who are celiac to be able to eat wheat? And then the second question is it possible to say how safe buying grains and nuts from the bulk sections are?
Okay. So as to the first one, there is, a pretty significant amount of research and trials going on into different approaches to some other kind of treatment other than the gluten-free diet. We're certainly not there yet, but it's pretty hopeful, I would say. I mean, just completely venturing kind of a guess, in the next, I don't know, 10 to 15 years, Laura, you feel free to jump in. There could very well be something. There's been a lot of advances. So I think it's a pretty hopeful scenario.
Yeah, I know somebody asked me the other day, would we be concerned if there was a cure for celiac disease? And we're like, no, that's the whole point. Why would,
Yeah.
put me out of business? That would be fine with me. That would be a great thing. And there's different studies every year. We keep hoping one of them is going to be it. It's always tricky. A lot of the ones that are out now, there's a lot of the IL-6 block and different antibodies to block different interleukins, and a lot of them are based around modifying your immune system in some way, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, vaccines technically sort of modify your immune system, and that's not bad. There's a good public health side to that. But what that usually means is it'll work really well for some people and maybe not as well for others. So finding a universal cure might be a tough thing.
Yeah. And I might just also add that even though, we do continue to see on the market sort of glutenase type products that claim to break down gluten, there is no scientific basis for the making of those claims. So they should not be used and relied on, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Maybe Laura, this is a question that you could answer possibly, or Jeannie. Somebody's asking, the product finder list, will that ever be available like as a scanner app or an app for your phone?
We would love it to become an app. And actually an app is on our list for production sometime in the future. I would love to give a time frame, but I can't give it to you at this point in time. But it's definitely something that we would love to be able to do. It's challenging because UPCs change all the time for products. Keeping track of, it's 60,000 products from all different manufacturers. So it is a challenging effort, but it is definitely one that we've been exploring for some time. So fingers crossed that does come soon.
I just jumped back to part 2 of my question on bulk products. I think it was bulk, lentils, nuts, grains, that sort of thing. Definitely not advisable to choose those products just because of a significant risk of cross-contamination. So again, and as I was saying earlier, choose packaged versions and preferably those that are labeled gluten-free.
And you can't look for certified versions of those. We do not certify anything that is not sealed when it is sold, because you can't guarantee what happens, what people have dropped into that bulk bin.
There's chatter too with the different pills, drugs, vaccines, possibility, how expensive they'll be, or if insurance will even cover them at this point. Any information that you guys have heard about that?
I think we are just way too far away from that becoming an actuality to really address those sorts of questions.
But you're probably right. It will probably be expensive.
Yeah.
And there's wonderful celiac organizations that are really focused on a cure. And I think that if you go to Beyond Celiac and Celiac Disease Foundation, that is their focus. Here at JIG, we're very focused on the here and now. So while we do stay on top of all the research and everything that's going on, making people's lives better right now and making sure that your food is safe is the priority of our organization.
Laura, maybe you can answer this one. They're asking if we know what companies in particular have like gluten-free seasonings. Would that be listed in that product list that you're talking about?
Yeah, I would check the product. I'd have to open up the database to let you know. So yeah, I would check the product finder, and if there's a brand you're, questioning, please use or contact us and go ahead and ask. If you're ever concerned about whether something's certified, go ahead and shoot us a message.
We definitely certify several spice brands. So,
We do.
and that is really something important to look for.
Back to the bulk product. Somebody is asking, is it possible to wash off gluten from bulk products like grains or even nuts?
Well, to some degree, yes. And this is actually something that has come up in response to the pandemic and, inability to always find the foods that you want in the forms that you want them. Say you really would like to choose packaged lentils, but they simply aren't available. How can you stay as safe as possible with bulk bin lentils? Certainly, yes, washing them and visually just looking for any foreign looking particles will definitely help. It gets a little bit trickier with some of the smaller grains, and I think Laura advised us on this earlier that you can do things. I should let you just jump in, but you can sort of put water on something like amaranth even, right, Laura? And
Yeah, if you don't have enough of a strainer, you can certainly, mix it up in some water and then filter it back off the top if you need to. Just, to get rid of any dust accumulation. But like you pointed out, the biggest source is going to be errant grains, particularly in something like lentils. So yeah, you want to spread those out on a countertop, and, even if you don't know if it's a gluten grain, if it's not a lentil, get it out of there. Something like oats, that's a little harder. So I wouldn't even try to do bulk bin oats, because it takes a really good eye to tell an oat groat from barley, and it's a bit of a challenge. So don't try it with oats.
Okay, another question. There's two questions here. It says, will the change in the FDA regulations affect medications? It's already very difficult to find out whether medications are gluten-free, both over the counter and prescription. And then somebody else kind of piggybacked on that and says, is there a link to find drugs that, and what's in that product, or just a basic web search?
this guidance does not pertain to medications at all. Go ahead, Laura, you were gonna.
Oh, no. Well, I was just going to say the FDA regulation actually doesn't cover medications in any way. So it's really just about gluten-free foods. They did put out a proposed, not even a proposed regulation. They did put out sort of a feeler about doing some type of regulation about gluten-free in drugs. They're very reticent to do anything, like they wouldn't apply the 20 ppm threshold and aren't interested in doing that. It was more along the lines of asking pharmaceutical companies to declare if there is a gluten-containing excipient in the medication, but not really making gluten-free claims on medications. And I don't know a specific link for looking up drugs and what they're made with. Do you know, Lola?
Well, I have a couple things I would recommend. On our website, gluten.org, we have an educational bulletin that's about gluten and medications. And on that, you'll see a couple of links to some sites where you can put in your medication name and get some of that information. There's also a link to a site called glutenfreedrugs.com that is run by a pharmacist who keeps it very updated, and there's a lot of ingredient information on his site.
And I am adding that link for you. I'm adding that link to that bulletin for you here in the chat.
Perfect. And I just actually had put the link to all of the resources that we have on the website as well. And I guess I don't know, basically, since we were talking about medications, somebody was just asking, do we know what the status is of the Gluten and Medication Disclosure Act?
It has not passed. They're still asking people to push your congressman and get them to vote for this. So yeah, please. And, thank you for putting up a link to it there.
Yeah.
I know I put something in the chat. If I missed any of your questions, if you want to just kind of put them in again. Otherwise, I think we've covered the majority of the questions that were proposed or written in the chat.
Just so everyone is aware, we did record this Zoom. There were quite a few people who asked us if we could share this recording with them. They'd like to hear about the discussion tonight. So I'm just letting everybody know, and happy to share the recording afterwards with anyone who'd like to listen again. Oh, it looks like we have another comment.
Okay, it says, somebody asked, it says, you recommended against gluten ease. I am not familiar with that. Is that how it's spelled? I believe it is. From what I've seen, it did not have the hyphen in it, but maybe you guys can explain that one a little bit more.
I don't even know. I know there have been various sort of variations of that name, because one of them, I believe, was a glutenase, because an ase means something that will break something down. I think there was one that was actually called glutenase. I'm not sure if it's still on the market.
But there's no evidence they work, right?
Right.
All right, Jeannie, are you done with us?
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm just looking and seeing. It looks like I think we're in. It looks like everyone would like a recording.
Yeah, somebody's asking, can they replay this recording for support groups? I think, Bethany Trainer's on the call too. I believe that's okay for you to share these with the support groups, the GIG branches and the Generation GF groups.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hi, Bethany.
Yeah, and that somebody else has just sent me a private message. It's about allergens in general, and just that there being concern. With gluten, we're able to test, but the whole relaxation of the FDA rules and just allergens in general. I know that's beyond our scope, and yet you probably have some good information and insight on that, Laura.
Oh, I'm sorry. Was that a question? I missed the beginning of it.
Yeah, just about allergens in general, beyond just gluten. A lot of people with celiac disease might have a dairy allergy or soy allergy or other issues.
Yeah, there's no doubt this regulation is especially scary for people with allergens, and particularly if you have an anaphylactic allergen. Same kind of idea. Somebody could accidentally substitute something in that has an allergen and they don't know it.
Or it could be, not one of the top 8 allergens, but still something that you happen to be allergic to. And so the manufacturer may think it's of no concern at all and just do it.
Yeah.
Another question came in. It says, is it true that all fruits and vegetables should be gluten-free if they don't have a coating on them?
Lola, I know we've talked about apple wax.
We have. They should be gluten-free, yes. It's always a good idea to wash your produce, of course, anyway, especially these days. We're all learning that. But generally, you should be fine with produce, yes.
We have a few more questions coming in. So somebody asked me privately if we've reached out to the FDA about the allergen concern. We did mention there is a letter that's actually on our website, which I can send a link to, that did go out, and that was, co-written by, it was the Gluten-Free Watchdog, and, which we signed on to the letter, as well as several other organizations. So I'll send a link to that so you can see what was said.
Yeah, there's a couple more here too. One, it says, is it unusual for celiacs to be sensitive to oats?
It is unusual. And a lot of, back in the day, a lot of people with celiac disease felt they couldn't eat oats because they were always contaminated with barley or wheat. Now that we have pure products. There are a very small population of people with celiac disease who say they can't tolerate oats. So it's unusual, but it apparently does happen.
Yeah, and it still is recommended actually that that you consult with your personal healthcare team before introducing oats and consume a relatively small quantity. But generally most people are fine, as Laura said, as long as they're reliably gluten-free oats.
See here, another question that came in is any suggestion for gluten-free lentils that they've looked on packages but unable to find. A second question is, how do you recommend washing produce then?
Yeah, for the lentils, I would just say, again, try the product finder. You probably can find a supplier on there. Produce washing, Lola, I'll let you take.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of washing produce, generally, as long as you kind of wash it in vigorously running water, you don't need anything additional. Depending on what it is, lettuces and leafy things like that, sort of break them up so that you're really getting into all of the nooks and crannies of things. And again, you're not really doing this for gluten for the most part, but just to remove any other potential contaminants.
Okay, let's see here. One more that came in. Is there a list of non-food items that can be an issue, such as Play-Doh, stamping ink, envelope glue? Not really sure what else to look for when, for items for their family to touch and use.
I don't know that we have a list. I know that we've addressed some of these products. I mean, Play-Doh, I believe still does contain gluten, so that's definitely something that kids who are gluten sensitive or have celiac disease should avoid. There certainly are ways to make gluten-free Play-Doh type products. Envelope glue, I haven't checked this real recently, but my understanding is that not too far back that really that was not a concern, that those were not gluten containing products. In terms of other things, we have addressed body products, for instance, lotions, sunscreens, those sorts of things. For the most part, anything that you put on your skin is not going to be an issue. Gluten is too big to be absorbed through the skin, and it's not going to have direct contact with your gastrointestinal system. The only time to be concerned is if it's something that you're getting on your hands, you are then going and picking up your sandwich with those hands that have gluten-containing sunscreen on them, and thereby inadvertently getting a little bit of that in your system.
I'm also just going to attach in the chat an article that lists some gluten-containing products to watch out for, especially with children.
Somebody also is asking, has there been any talk about other items that could be added, such as her daughter has a reaction to quinoa?
Other products that could be added in what way?
It just says, have there been talks about items that could be added as gluten-free people cannot have, as her daughter has the same reaction to quinoa?
I mean, that would be a separate type of reaction. I mean, there certainly is a higher incidence of sensitivities to other ingredients and products among people with celiac disease and gluten sensitivity, but it's a different issue.
We had such great questions tonight. This was a wonderful event, and I think that we've come to the end of the questions. So I just wanted to thank all of you for coming tonight. I wanted to thank Lola and Laura and Stacy. I didn't even introduce you. Stacy was our question reader throughout the night, and I do appreciate that. And I just think it's wonderful that you could all attend tonight, and I hope that we can continue the conversation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all for coming. Thanks so much.
Thanks for attending, everyone.